we're told that Glenn Youngkin won because of racism, and there are a lot of white supremacists, all these parents, bunch of white supremacists, and that's why they voted for Glenn Youngkin. Because this is a strategy that's really going to work going into 2022, the midterms, and then going into 2024. I mean, the Democrats, they tried calling parents domestic terrorists. Terry McAuliffe came out and said, parents, it's none of your business what happens in the schools. Let the teachers decide. Major backlash against that. And now they're simply going to double down on it and say, yeah, you're a bunch of racist white supremacists. But that's interesting because the lieutenant governor is a woman by the name of Winsome Sears, and she's a black woman. She's the first black lieutenant governor in Virginia. And this is the woman that a bunch of white supremacist racists voted for. Now, she got up last night to speak, and all those racists in the audience, they were, oddly enough, I don't know if they all had their eyes closed or what. It was kind of dark. I don't know what it is. They didn't notice that she was a black woman because they were all cheering for her, even though they're a bunch of racists. But let's listen to a little bit of Winsome Sears last night.
We're going to have safer neighborhoods, safer communities, and our children are going to get a good education. Because education lifted my father out of poverty, education lifted me out of poverty, education will lift us all out of poverty because we must have marketable skills so that our children can not just survive, but they will thrive. And they will create generational wealth. That's what this is about. I'm going to finish up. We love you too. It's a historic night, yes it is, but I didn't run to make history. I just wanted to leave it better than I found it.
She is actually a talented and charismatic speaker, and there aren't very many of those in the Republican Party. There aren't very many of those in politics in general or in life. It's a rare talent, but the Republican Party has been really hurting for those types of politicians who can get up there and just kind of speak and sound natural, not sound scripted, and have a natural kind of charisma to them. She really has that. So I think there's a star in the making here. We're going to be seeing a lot more from Winsome Sears, who again is beloved by the white supremacists in the audience, cheering, shouting they love her. How can that be? Well, here's how it really happens. Is because the media, when the media gets around to acknowledging the existence of Winsome Sears, which they haven't done, they right now the strategy is we're not going to talk about this woman at all. But eventually, especially if she gets more and more high profile, they're going to have to acknowledge her. And when they do, they're going to say, well, she's technically black, but really she's a part of the structures of whiteness or whatever nonsense. So she's white in spirit, if not in terms of skin pigment. That's what they'll say. Now, all of that said, of course, making this a racial thing is absurd. And it would be absurd no matter what, but especially absurd when the guy who lost is white as well. But making this a racial thing is absurd. Saying that it's, tying this to racism is, of course, completely ridiculous. This is part of the Democrat Tourette syndrome. They don't. It's instinctive. Everything. Anytime something doesn't go the way they like, is racism. They can't. They're stuck in traffic and they're in their cars shouting, "Racism! Racism did this." That's all ridiculous. However, the claim that part of the story here is "quote unquote" white backlash. That's not entirely false. There is an element of so-called white backlash. In that, it turns out white parents aren't really crazy about sending their kids to school so that they can learn that they are evil, that they're inherently bigoted, that they are the inheritors of generational guilt for things that they didn't do. Okay, so yeah, it turns out a lot of white people aren't crazy about that. It turns out that a lot of white people don't like being cast as the villains, don't like being degraded and insulted. So is that part of the story? Sure, that's part of it. And there's nothing strange about that. There's nothing outrageous about it. There's certainly nothing racist about it. But from the left's perspective, they think they should be able to shout at white people, say you're all a bunch of scumbags and villains, and say, send your kids to us and we're going to tell them the same thing. Send your scummy demon offsprings to us so that we can tell them all about how they're inherently racist and that nobody can be racist against them. And that's somehow they have to apologize simply for existing. All of their, their ancestors were all scumbags as well, or worse. So the left thinks they should say that to us, and our response should be, okay, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, however you identify. And we'd bow our heads in shame and go along. And if we dare say, you know what, I'm not crazy about that. I don't agree. Then they start shouting, white backlash, the white people are upset. Well, yeah. Yes, you're correct about that part of it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.